After just a few months on the job, Chief Renee Hall is making her mark in a big way.
We do know that historically, law enforcement is predominantly male. This is a job that's about passion.
Just because she's female, she's a tough chief.
I knew as soon as I started playing football that it was my destiny.
Outside.
Jenn does a great job when she's blitzing. One of the hardest hitting football players I've ever seen.
We need diversity in Congress, in places like Congress.
The first female Marine to fly in an F-18 in combat has a personal history of trying to do the impossible and succeeding.
Over the years, I came to learn that the major difference between those who accomplish their dreams, despite or against all odds, against all cultural resistance and the no's and all of that, is one thing really: perseverance and persistence. And today I have the pleasure and the honor actually of being with a group of women who are PerSisters, who paved the path not only for themselves but for generations of women to come. My name is Zainab Salbi. I'm the founder of Women for Women International, and I'm here with Chief Renee Hall, the Dallas' first female chief of police. Amy McGrath, America's first female F-18 fighter pilot for the Marines, running for Congress in the state of Kentucky. And Dr. Jenn Walter, the NFL's first female coach and author of the new book, Play Big. Now, I hope we play big in this panel in here, so let's start with big. I mean, it's not only you're the first, you actually entered in an extremely male-dominated sectors, the police, the Marine, the NFL. I want to start with you, Chief Hall. How do you intend about addressing a very particular culture and maybe changing it where it can be more accommodating for more women?
I think what we have to recognize is that although it is a male culture and it has been dominated by men over the years, that there's nowhere that is written that it is a male's job, that this job can be done by anyone. And not only that we can do it, we do it well. We're extremely talented in this space. Women have been in law enforcement for many, many years. We got a big start, maybe like in the 70s, where you start to see an influx of women throughout multiple agencies across the country. And then we started to show up and actually show out. You know, one of the things that I say is not only am I a female in this role, but when you look across the country, how many police chiefs have 18 years in law enforcement? So it's not just that you do the job and you do the job as a woman, but you do the job well. So I think that we just have to remember that this job is not about who does it, but it's how we do it. And the goal is serving a community who looks to us to protect them and looks to us to make sure that we're partners. And that is what it's all about, is who is going to get the job done.
And you are getting the job done, but we'll get into that for a second. Fantastic. Amy, let me go to you. How about, I mean, you're just entering into a congressional candidacy in Kentucky. How do you go about the culture change in politics, especially in these days?
Well, it's very difficult, but not impossible. What I learned in the military and in the Marine Corps is performance matters, and rising in the ranks, having more women rise, it really matters. That's when the culture changes, because you can structurally change things, you can open doors, but until you get women in positions of power, which in the military means you rise through the ranks, that's when the culture changes. And in no other way is it going to actually happen. And so in politics, you know, we're not doing so well, right? in this country, okay? I'm serious, with the percentage of women in our legislatures, we're like, what, number 101 out of the world right now in the percentage of women in our legislatures. That matters. And so we need more. And because it changes the dynamic of what we talk about, it will change our politics. I'm convinced of it. And that's one of the reasons I'm running. But we need the help of everybody to help in that endeavor.
Absolutely, and I think of it as all interconnected. More presence of women means more different treatment of women, means more opening for women, means different way of looking at the culture and at productivity itself. Amy, how about you? I'm sorry, Jen, how about you? I mean, the NFL is very, is as male as it can get. Right?
It's great to be the one of one. And, you know, the first thing I would say is thank you to everyone who's here tonight. Thank you to this wonderful platform and to all the sponsors, because that's where it starts. When you change the visibility, you create the possibility, and then also increase the probability that these things will happen. I was one of the best females to play football in the world for a very long time. And if you would have asked me one day before I got the opportunity to coach in the NFL, I would have told you, no, it's not possible. Because there was nobody I could look at and say, I want to be her when I grow up. And the beauty of being any first, and I'm sitting with two stellar women here and many others in the room that I don't know yet, but I hope to know, is that now every little girl gets to dream that as a dream, and it's normal. Right? It's like, well, of course I want to be that. Yeah. Why wouldn't I? Because now we've shown them something different, and that's where it all starts. In terms of the NFL, you know, the thing I love is that I can sit here and say that I was championed by very strong men. And part of that is because if there are no women in the room, a man has to open the door for you. It's not that a woman wouldn't have, but in my situation, they couldn't because there was no one there. And those guys trusted me because of the reputation I had in the trenches. And I know that's what both of these ladies have already said.
Yep. I like that. It's sort of a different door opening. You know, from the classic one, a woman gets out of the car. This is a different door opening for an opportunity. And what you all have made actually is made the impossible possible. And I want to go back to you, Chief Hall. You have been in the job as a police chief for over 2 months, and you wasted no time. You shook up things, you cleaned house, and to say the least, courageous. Of anybody, man or woman, it doesn't matter. It's a very courageous act to come with actions immediately. How do you go about handling a particular culture that you came to, and also the disgruntled men in the process?
Well, as you know, the Dallas Police Department is approximately 84% men. And I think what we have to focus on is what's the mission? And the mission is the community that we serve. Each one of you who sit out in this audience, we signed up to take care of those who could not, under normal circumstances, take care of themselves. But we also have to look at how have we done that over the years. I don't care how far you go back. Police officers have worked in an oppressive manner. And we have to move from oppression to partnership. And in order to get that done, we have to look through a different lens. We have to push the reset button. We have to let our community know that it's no longer us against them. It's a partnership, and we're working together to solve crime, quality of life issues, and just to build a greater Texas, Dallas, and the world as a whole. So when I made the changes, it wasn't about male or female. Mm-hmm. It was about what do we need to do and how do we need to get there. So what I looked at is who in this organization shares my vision. Who in this organization is ready to move this city, the state of Texas, to the next level, 21st century policing, building relationships and partnerships. And that's how I made my decision. And it's not going to make everybody happy. And when we talk about men, it's more of them than it is of us. but it's not just male or female.
I agree.
It is definitely just about the job itself. So I'm excited. I'm passionate about the people that sit in front of me. And I have pledged, I believe I am a very faith-driven individual, and I know that God has set me on a mission. And it is my job and my responsibility to hold to task that which he has given me. And I have to select those individuals who are on board and ready to move this city forward. So is it difficult? Absolutely. To make changes, to demote people and take them from one rank to another, and it's not fun. And I don't sleep well in that space. But what I rest on is that we have a job to do, much like in the military, much like on the football field. We have a responsibility to those that are around us. And once I focus on the mission, I get comfortable in my space.
Brilliant, brilliant.
And
now you had.
Can I add
Yeah,
something
of
to what
course.
she said? I think one of the things that goes to the core of it is you see this anytime you have a leadership change. Your leader is only going to be as effective as the team that they build around them, right? If she came in, you look at a coaching change in football, for example, and you don't see them just bring in a head coach. The head coach brings in an offensive coordinator, a defensive coordinator, and players that will embody and replicate out that great leadership and that message, because if it's just said one time, it's going to be lost in a vacuum or in an echo. And you have to create that team that's around you. And it takes bravery to bring a different voice to any situation. I remember the best advice before I got going into the NFL was from former Dallas Cowboy, who unfortunately just passed away, Terry Glenn, who was a dear friend of mine. And he said, the best advice I can give you is to be 100% authentic. If you are the same person that you were here with us at the Texas Revolution here in Allen, Texas, which now is in Frisco, those guys will absolutely love you. But if you're fake in any way, they will sense it and they will eat you alive. And that's what anybody wants to know is, can I trust that the advice that you're giving me is your absolute best? And then they'll follow.
Well, that's very true, actually. And I have to say, I have to switch. I mean, talk about authenticity. All of you have that, very, very much that. And Amy, you release a very authentic voice in your video when you decided to run for Congress. I want to see if we can take a look at that, actually. I know we're ahead, which I'm changing.
When I was 12 years old, I knew exactly what I wanted to do when I grew up. I wanted to fly fighter jets and land on aircraft carriers because that's the toughest flying you could do. When I was 13, my congressman told me I couldn't fly in combat. He said Congress thought women ought to be protected and not allowed to serve in combat. I never got a letter back from my Senator Mitch McConnell.
True. I mean, what I love about this video is actually your own sincerity about it. You just use this pure authenticity in here. Can you tell us what happened from the no letter back, to being the first female F-18 pilot who flew 89 combat missions?
Well, what happened is I was 12 years old at that time, and I worked very hard during high school. I just kept working. And the good news for me is we had leadership in places like Congress. And we had a new administration come in 1993. Frankly, folks, I was lucky. I was 17 years old. We had a new president and a new Congress. And they came in and they changed the structural barriers. There were real structural barriers that said women couldn't do these things. And they changed the law. And I got a chance to the doors were open to me. And I just worked, and I just persisted, and I just, went through my days at the Naval Academy and then worked my butt off in the Marine Corps and got to these positions. And I loved every minute of it. And here I am 20 years later, retired, and realized that there was a new mission. So you're right, I had 89 combat missions, but now my 90th mission is running for office because we need better leaders.
And you shall do it, honestly. I wish I was living in Kentucky just so I can vote for you. Seriously, I mean, I hear you and I'm inspired. There's an authenticity in here. Let's go back to the personal for a second in here. Chief Hall, you had a very hard story, as in your father was killed as a police officer, though he was not in the line of duty when he was killed in a robbery, and the investigation never found his killer when you were still a child. How did that impact you and your trajectory in life? You're here back into the police force.
Well, as I say, I've told my story a million times. I don't think I ever wanted to be the police. If you let me tell it, I was going to be a lawyer, but God had a different assignment for me. So how it's shaped me, you know, I come from humble beginnings, and when law enforcement was forced in front of me, my graduate school professor was the chief of police. And he recognized something in me, and he always said, you need to be in law enforcement. You'll be a chief in no time. He would always say that to me. And of course, I blew him off for the first couple of years, and then I finally joined the police department. But I will tell you how it's shaped me, and we'll talk about just some of the changes that I made. The badge is important. My father died doing this job, so the integrity of what we do is important. So when I made a decision to shut down a unit in my organization, it is because we will not even have the hint of impropriety. It is important that the individuals who wear the uniform and wear the badge have the highest level of integrity, that we are accountable, and that we have trust and legitimacy within our community, so that my father's life is not in vain. And that's what drives me, that's what motivates me. That is why I feel like the officers in the Dallas Police Department are some of the greatest officers in this country, and we have to make sure that that is always the image that the community sees, and nothing different will ever tarnish what that image looks like.
And that's what builds trust.
Yes,
that's the foundation of trust building. Yeah, fantastic, fantastic. Jenn, before you rose up the ranks, you also had a tough story in which you were homeless for a couple of months. And can you tell us more about it? Because it was more about your decision of not tolerating abuse.
It was, you know, and I would put that in the context of, at that point, being homeless was probably the easiest time I had had in a long time. And, you know, I was living here in Dallas. I was, at that time, one of the best football players in the world. I had 3 Super Bowls with the Dallas Diamonds. And I had all but my, you call it ABD, for my doctorate. So I was very accomplished professionally in all of my chosen fields, and yet, personally, my relationship was suffering. The more successful I got, the worse my relationship got, and he was very insecure and jealous and emotionally destructive. And it was a typical power dynamic. And I decided at that point that nothing was worth that. And so I left. And I left everything behind, everything that I thought was what security and success looked like. And I used to say it was my golden cage, but it was still a cage. And I made that choice to be able to start again, and yet it didn't stop me from doing anything that I was doing. You know, I was still in school, I was still playing football, and nobody knew.
Did it impact how you dealt with other obstacles in the future? I mean, when you became the first female coach, people questioned whether a woman can be an NFL coach. Did it impact how you handled?
Look, they questioned everything my entire career. I mean, it was never a popular or sexy decision to be a woman who played football. You know, and here we were doing all the right things for all the right reasons and playing for $1 a game when men were getting paid millions. It was never a popular decision to move into playing a season in men's professional football. That was harder than coaching in the NFL. I remember the best criticism I got was when someone had said, it was, you know, an anonymous internet troll, because they're so brave and wise.
I'm dealing with that now.
Yeah, I mean, you'll get a lot of them, but this is, the best thing I learned is to throw it back at them. And I read it and I was like, wow, The guy said that I was gonna get hit and die and or get pregnant. And I thought that was pretty impressive, because as one of the best linebackers in the world, I never knew it was possible to hit someone so hard that you could create immaculate conception and death, right, all at once.
Right.
So all of these things led me to be somebody who dealt with adversity in the best way possible, and that's really to laugh at the people who just don't get it or don't get you, because they only win when you give them the power to control what you're doing. And so I did the wisest thing I could have done when I was in the NFL, and that's not hook up the TV.
Yeah. Amy, now many women do not run for public office because of the toll they worry of taking on their family. You have 3 children.
I do.
You are married, mind you, to a Republican. So I'm very curious about the discussion between the two of you in the household. But this is for another conversation. What was the pivotal moment? What was the pivotal moment that made you decide, I'm stepping for it, I'm going for it?
So it was, for me, folks, like probably many of you, the 2016 elections, the results of those really made me take a step back. And it wasn't just the results, but the whole elections themselves, the fake news, the divisiveness of our country. This is the country I fought for. This is the country that I lost friends for. And I just would not accept that. I am not accepting of where we're at right now. And I'm the kind of person that I'm a doer. And so I felt like I got to do this. I got to stand up. You know, I've had this awesome career and it's been amazing and wonderful, but this is where I need to go. And do I know anything about politics? A little bit. But who cares? You know, look who's in the White House. And seriously.
That's a good point.
We can do it, and that's the thing, is that I felt like I've done hard things before that people said I couldn't do. So bring it on, and then you go about surrounding yourself with a good team. You go about continuing to be a person of character and integrity, and you just do it. And we're on the start of this thing, but it's going pretty well. And you know, we're fighting. I'm fighting the establishment right now, okay, in my campaign, even from my own party. Right? You know, you would think the Democratic Party would embrace, you know, a woman, a new face, maybe someone with children. That's not necessarily the case at the national side. And so we're fighting some of that too. But my attitude is bring it on. And with the family, you know, I always look at it, and had I stayed in the military, I would have probably had to deploy again. So this is way easier than that.
It's true. Now let's talk about the moments of these times, of all the sexual harassment cases that are coming out, and how do we handle such moment? I'm tempted to start with you, Jenn, but I'm going to end with you, Jenn, because I know you have some interesting thing to do. But Amy, let's start with you, actually, because, you know, Senator Al Franken, Representative John Conyers, what do you think we're going through a cultural change moment at the moment, and what do you think the changes that needs to happen in the political system?
Well, I think, number one, I hope that we're going through a cultural change. I hope. I think, number one, this can't be political. So we have to stand up no matter what party the perpetrators are in, and in my case, you know, we have to say, do the right thing. I think that's probably the biggest thing. But what is going to change it? My fundamental belief is women rising and being in positions of and getting in positions of power, getting in positions in places like Congress. You know, that is going to make a difference. I saw that in my career in the military. You know, when I first joined the Marine Corps in my first unit, I was a young first lieutenant, and they would do aircrew training, and it was all men, and every other PowerPoint slide was a porn slide, you know, and I didn't really have the power to stand up. I had no credibility. I had no qualifications at that time because I was so junior. It wasn't because I was bad. It was just junior. And when I came back in my second tour, now you had women of higher rank. Now you were captains, you were majors, and I had other women in the squadron. And none of that stuff happened anymore. And it totally changed the dynamic because men were our peers now. They weren't just our superiors, they were our peers. And they went through training with us. And they had women who were superior to them in terms of rank. And so I think more women in political life will help this. More women in the boardrooms will help this. And I think it can change.
I completely agree.
Can
and
I add to that one thing, though?
Yeah, sure.
It's not only women.
Yeah.
It's rooms like this having men.
Yeah.
Yes.
So thank you for all the men who are in here.
That's true. Yeah, very true.
Because to me, clearly y'all are geniuses because you want to know how we think.
Chief Hall, well, let's actually, let's stay in here. I mean, what is your experience? Because it's almost like in the sports world, allegations of related to violence and sexual harassment, all of that started ahead of its time, ahead of the time right now. What is your experience of what's going on?
Well, first of all, you have to realize, and one of the things that you already touched on, but I'm going to build on, is that sexual harassment is a power play. It is a power dynamic, and it's not just men against women. It can also be women versus men. It tends to be that insecure person who got into a place of power. And this is the way that they express what they have never had for the rest of their lives. It's just like a short man who drives a Hummer. Okay, and we've heard about it from a badge perspective. It was that guy who got beat up in high school and now he's a bad cop. It's not just about sex. It's about control. And so for me, people would say, oh, well, you must have gotten it all the time in the NFL. I'm like, nope, not really. I was the coach. Okay? And so it was a lot different for me. Those guys actually were very protective of me, even when I played on the team. But to me, that's how we change a lot of this dynamic is, in a way, ladies, I love you, but we have to an extent, give guys their balls back. Meaning a lot of them are terrified. They don't know how to be a gentleman anymore because it's like they're wrong if they open the door too. And we have to do a better job of encouraging these conversations to come together. Like you said, where we're in the trenches together, we're teammates. We're not, over or under, we're all working together. And for those guys, a lot of the times, for me, it is, if those guys change the locker room, which, the women aren't in, and they hear a guy talking about it, and he's like, dude, would you say that about your sister? It shuts it down because they won't keep talking if there's no one to talk to. So not only do we need women to come up, but we need to also do a good job of working together and empowering each other, because I think that that's truly the next evolution of women's advancement is when we're linking arms.
It's a very good point, I have to say. It's a very good point. Chief Hall, last word for you. How do you handle that within the police force? And what's next?
I think that it's pretty much been said. It's pretty much about having the power, being in position to be able to change the culture. Because the only way that you can make a difference, you have to be in a position to make a difference. I think what's happening across this country is women are women in the world. We have taken a position in the world, and we're saying no more. We've seen this unacceptable behavior from the President of our United States, and we say, if we allow this, it will continue at every level. And I think that what we've seen in the world today with all of the uncovering is what happens in law enforcement, what happens in the military, what happens in the NFL, is when you say no more, it stops. And I think we've been given a voice. We're in position to have a voice, and that's what's happening. I think what's next is we continue this dialogue. We continue to recognize the power that we have individually and collectively in this capacity, and we continue to make the decisions that we want made. We recognize that it is not okay to be misogynistic. It is not okay to sexually assault a woman. And we have to make sure that we are in Congress, that we are in position to make laws and to hold people accountable for that. And that's what's next.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
God bless to all of you. Seriously, thank you, and keep going. And you're inspiring all of us. Thank you very, very, very much.